Hi. Now we will be starting our second panel. Cities are pulsating heart of our societies. People from diverse backgrounds come together to live, work, and thrive. So it is imperative that we ensure that cities are designed and governed in a manner that promotes gender equality, inclusivity, and safety for all. Our next session will delve into this topic of gender and urban governance further. I will invite Dr. Kalpana Vishwanath, who will be moderating this session. And we have a wonderful lineup of our speakers. First up, we have Mrs. Shailaja Chandra, former Chief Secretary of Delhi. Ma'am, may I request you to join us on the stage? Shailaja Chandra has been a career civil servant, having worked in the central government for 15 years in Ministry of Defence, Power, Health, and in Manipur, Goa, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and the Delhi government. Mrs. Chandra was a union secretary in the Health Ministry and later distinguished herself as Chief Secretary of Delhi, the only woman to have held this position. During this tenure, the privatization of power in Delhi took effect, as did the switch over to CNG in all public transport vehicles. Welcome, ma'am. We also have Ms. Nandita Baruah, Country Representative, the Asia Foundation. Nandita Baruah is the Asia Foundation Country Representative in New Delhi, India. She has over 30 years of experience working in the development sector in Asia. She has served in Nepal, Cambodia, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and India, and has provided technical support to programs in Mongolia, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Fiji, and Thailand, among others. Her core areas of expertise include gender equity and women's empowerment. Welcome, ma'am. We also have today with us Ms. Insa Illgen, Project Director, Sectorproject, Sustainable Mobility, GIG. Ms. Illgen is a tech and mobility enthusiast and team leader of Sectorproject Sustainable Mobility. As a former head of the GIG Tech Radar Tech Detector, her motivation is to join forces on sustainable mobility solutions and increase technology and data-based solutions for sustainable development. Welcome, ma'am. We have Ms. Meera Sundarajan, Team Lead, Gender and Policy Lab, Greater Chennai Corporation. She is a social development professional with over 2 decades of experience in the social sector. She has worked with government, NGOs, and corporate entities as a monitoring and evaluation lead, gender expert, and program manager. Welcome, ma'am. Today, we also have Mr. Anand Iyer, Chief of Policy and Insights at Janagra Center for Citizenship and Democracy. He has over 22 years of experience working across state and central government in the urban development, private sector, and consulting in land infrastructure and building, and practice in architecture and design, and now civil society organization in citizen and democracy. Thank you. Welcome all.
Thank you. Thank you all. People are told not to have manners. We made sure we didn't have a wannel. We have Anand with us here. So welcome to all of you. So I think a lot of the key things were set out in the previous panel because urban governance, I mean, it's all about what actually happens on the ground, right? You can have your policies, you can have data, you can have programs, everything, but how does the rubber hit the road, as Mrs. Puri said this morning? And I think that's what we want to talk about in this panel. How do you build those gender responsive urban policies? How do you integrate it into, we have our complex, chaos, messy cities. These are not greenfield cities we're talking about. We're talking about cities that exist. How do we improve them? And I think I'm not going to say much more because we have such an amazing panel today. I'm going to begin with Mrs. Chandra because she has had the experience of actually running many things, including this crazy city that we all live in, Delhi. So I'm going to start with you, ma'am, to really share with us what, in your view, were the key challenges in urban governance, bringing in a gender perspective. What were some of the key policy initiatives that you felt were sort of landmark, which were able to maybe not necessarily bring a change, but were able to move the needle to some extent?
Thank you, Kalpana, for having me here, and hello to all my fellow panelists and everybody in the audience, which seems to be overwhelmingly female. So that's fine. We are talking about women's issues, so that's absolutely in order. I got associated with Kalpana maybe about 5 years ago. I had run you might say, a Delhi Matters series in the India International Center. And that is when I heard Kalpana and I heard Krishna Menon and Meenakshi Gopinath, who had just retired as principal of LSR. They were all there. And we had the Special Commissioner of Police, Mr. Beniwal. And it was, again, like you, one man and probably a big panel of women who going for him left and right. And it was nice to see a man in uniform having to listen to all that. I'm going to focus on some of not only the takeaways from that, but to honestly tell you, Kalpana, for us during the time I was Chief Secretary, women's issues were not center stage because the only way they got center stage was because Mrs. Dixit, the then Chief Minister, believed very strongly and made me a Chief Secretary and put all her favorite officers as secretaries to Government of India and heads of departments. So that was the only message that was given, and women brought their own perspective to environment, to social welfare, to health, where she had planted women. But the talk today is not about Sheila Dixit or about what happened in my time. What I want to focus on is a watershed that took place when the 2013 Nirbhaya rape case happened in Delhi. We all, and including Mrs. Dixit, to whom I spoke, at that time I wasn't Chief Secretary, but I had good relations with her, and she said, "Arey, arey, arey, Shailaja ji, ye sab pass ho jayega, chhodiye, chhodiye, koi badi baat nahi hai." I said, "Madam, people will be on the streets. Do something. The police commissioner and others are not taking it seriously. This is very serious." So she said, "Nahi, nahi, nahi." And then you know what happened. The entire Delhi was on the streets. Water cannons were, water in the cold of December were fired on crowds. And ultimately, a Justice Verma commission was set up. And Justice Verma came up with lots and lots of recommendations on sexual, you might say, taking care of the sexual aspects of a woman's life, and everything to do with workplace, to do with voyeurism, to do with molestation, everything. And the law changed. So the CRPC was changed as a result, because for 9 months, people had nothing else on their minds, but you could see that that was latent. That happened in a bus. So when we talk about transport, you can't have a worse situation than happened then. With that, we came forward onto many things onwards about women, and I got involved with Safetipin in a very peripheral way. I'm on the advisory board, I know, but I have often asked Kalpana, and even I was talking to her colleagues who were kind enough to chat with me outside. I said, if you have to say what is the one thing that you want to tell a policymaker, you're doing great work, you're making an impact, you are very much in demand, international agencies have noticed you, you are giving advice to other people in other countries, what more could you ask for? But if you are asking me to get involved as an ex-policy maker, I still write a lot, and I write on policy mostly. My Twitter handle is over to Shailaja. So if you really want to approach a policymaker, and I have only 5 points, so don't think I'm going to hog up the whole morning doing all this, but I think you should know. A policymaker looks at what is the prevalence of the problem, what is the incidence of the problem, right? Data. An example, I was a joint secretary in the Ministry of Health looking after many things, and cataract blindness program was given to me, and the secretary said, it's been rejected 3 times by the World Bank, and let's see what you can do. He was quite sort of brusque with me. So when I looked at it, I found that where are the prevalence studies? So we got AIMS professors, and they said in these 7 states, the prevalence of cataract blindness is the highest. Where is the incidence very high? And they were able to give the data. On that, we approached the World Bank, and it was accepted as a project. It was one of the best projects, at least have been done in the World Bank sector and the social sector, because we did 11 million cataract surgeries in a course of 5 years in 7 states. I didn't do them, it was done by the states. But how? Because data was there, which districts, how to do the transportation of people, how to bring them to a district center, all that was mapped out. You're not doing a World Bank project or a national program, but whatever you do to get the attention of a policymaker, first and foremost, you have to be able to get attention. And attention only comes if you have data. Rhetoric does not work. Any amount of this happens on the road, that happens in the bus, that happens in the metro, doesn't matter. My first request to Kalpana and to the entire team is, when you talk of this kind of a situation, which exists, I'm not putting it down at all. Whatever is known about public spaces, whatever is known about the transport sector in urban areas, we all know what goes on about the groping, the ogling, the pushing, all those things, and the fact that you don't have the freedom to behave as you would like to without something happening which annoys you. So if you want to compile data, it has to be, number one, exit interviews. You have to have some sample size. You have to be able to say, this happened if Delhi has more than 290 wards, at least which are the wards which are the most significant. Among those wards, where is the trouble spots, the hot spots? If you are not going to do it, then if you can't do it for the whole of Delhi, do it for 2 or 3 wards where your sense tells you these are difficult areas. Metro stations, have your exit interviews. At bus stations, have the exit interviews. At the last mile connectivity, walking home, walking from the home to the commuting center. All this data is absolutely critical for policy making. Nobody will listen to you. They'll be nice to you. They might give you a little money to do a study, but nothing more than that. So I would really urge that if you can't do that, then the huge horizon that awaits you will be really lost. You'll keep doing good work, but if you want policymakers to take note, that's important. That's number one. The good thing about the Nirbhaya incident, the good part, is that we have, in Delhi at least, even in India, I would say, it has shaken the public conscience, with the result that no longer is there any shame. Is there any kind of a, closed door approach? People are aware. But why is it only restricted to some cities and not others? I know that, I still use public transport. And very often, let me tell you, even with all the background of having been looked after in government, I'm able to travel, sometimes in Mumbai, even using the local train, because it's so much faster. If you get down at Dadar station, if you're pushed from the Western Railway to the Central Railway, if you want to go to change the line, you don't have to do anything. You're just pushed. Nobody touches you. Nobody. And God forbid somebody tries to touch your neck or your chain, or tries to grope you or pushes you. You've just to say, stop it, or thamba in Marathi, and you see how the public will deal with that fellow. There is an immediate public reaction. I'm not asking for vigilantism. I'm not asking anybody to beat up anybody, but I'm saying the consciousness in Mumbai is, even today, despite all the in-migration and everything, that culture still remains. It's not there in Delhi. Here, people look the other way. They'd rather say, I don't want to get involved. Let this woman do what she wants. That is the other thing which worries me. Now, you must also understand, can the government do anything? If you're talking to a government, if you're talking to an international NGO, you're talking to the World Bank, that's a different thing. But if you're talking to a government, you must know, does it matter to the government? Government only sees through the spectacles of not women. They look at it in graded ways of which wealth quintile are you talking about? Are you talking about the poorest of the poor? Are you talking about working women who go to do blue-collar work in homes or in shop floors or whatever that is? Or the slightly above that, the teachers, the clerks? Are you talking about people even above that? What level, what kind of groups are you talking? If you don't have that, you, as a policymaker, I cannot talk in terms of women. It just because everything has a context, and that in a government, everybody has a desk, and immediately this is not my work happens. If you're not able to focus on who are you talking about, it cannot be cross-cutting all women. So what do you think matters the most? Who do you want to help the most? That is very important. The other thing that I felt that I should share with you. I have noticed on a positive note, somewhat, Kalpana, I don't know whether you have anything to do with it, or people like you, your organizations, or whether it was the, teaching scooter drivers about Samman Karte Hain Hum Auraton Ka and all that program. But somewhere there has been a sea change. I had a job in the India International Center. I was working for the Yamuna Monitoring Committee. And during lunchtime, I used to go to Lodi Gardens to stroll around. I went to Nehru Park because we had about an hour off when no meetings could be held. And even parks which are nearby, near my house, they didn't have to be large parks. I have found that the culture of young men and women, to use a very archaic expression from my time, not your time, they were romancing. So if they're romancing, earlier people would have ogled, hooted, whistled, passed lewd remarks. I never saw that. That is somewhat of a change which has taken place. I don't know what has happened. That means somewhere something has percolated. On the other hand, you listen to a Mr. Beniwal who told us just 5 years ago, he said, put a bunch of men, any age, just men in a room. If they're not talking about politics or property, they will be talking about women in a very, very deprecating way. Jokes, mostly it's jokes. And like Jane Austen wrote, she could never write about any scene where there were two men or more talking, because she never saw a scene where there were two men or more. She was always surrounded by only women. So when women talk to women, we don't know what is going on when people stand around a bar. Yes, they talk politics or they talk about property and about investments and all a lot. But they also, and networking, but they also, when it becomes a little advanced, people do start, this is a police report. People are juvenile by nature, and this happens, you must stop it when the kid is young. Now, in a home, it's very easy to say it's the mother who has to play the role, it's the sister who has to play the role. All this is just platitudes. Can organizations do anything about encouraging a sister or a girl child to say what was her experience? I know that I came from a highly educated family, an enlightened mother, educated at Cambridge in the days when girls didn't even go to school. And when I told her that when I come back from college, Miranda House we were staying around Khan Market area, I said, it's awful, the groping that goes on. You have no idea what I go through. If I take a seat near the window, I'm finished. If I'm standing, I'm finished. There's so much crowd. That has changed. You don't have that kind of crowd except in metro, but fortunately, metro does have ladies' compartments. Now, when I told my mother, she had this Completely, you might say, not that she wasn't sympathetic, she had no time for these issues. She was a working woman, and for her, running the house, running her office, she was a widow to boot, she had 2 children to bring up, she was not going to give it importance. So that is where I feel, if at that time she had given it importance, maybe I could have got more people to listen. That was, of course, decades ago. I'll wind up, Kalpana. I can see that you're getting restless. I'm just finished in a minute. Anyway, even my computer has packed up, I think. So it's high time I finished on only one note. What you're doing is important. What you're trying to get done about women, about spaces, about safe transport, safely moving around, and being able to be a woman and be proud of it is great. My only submission, if I might say so, is if you approach a policymaker, remember there are many departments. It's not totally a women and child issue or a health issue or an urban development issue or a home ministries issue. You've got to be very clear. What is the key takeaway that you want, which is the key ministry, which is the key desk you want to go after? Otherwise, it'll be all lost in the crisis that every government department faces every day. Thank you so much. Sorry taking so long.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you. I think that was very valuable to, because we all are approaching governments all the time. And I think that was, it is important. It's true. When you just go and give a whole lot of data and stuff, they also don't know what to do. So thank you so much for that. I will turn to Insa from Women Mobilize Women and GIZ. I think if you could share with us, actually, Germany this year, earlier this year, actually announced a feminist development policy as a country. And I think, how has this policy announcement influenced your work? What was your role in it? How do you see it will influence international work? And also, how is it going to address the issues of gender transformation?
Yes, no, it's not. Now it is. Okay, perfect. Yeah, as you can imagine, since we are also the host of the Women Mobilize Women initiative since 2018, the announcement of a feminist development policy, but also a feminist foreign policy of the German government was in the beginning, of course, like music to our ears. Like this was, yes, exactly, this is what we're doing and this is what we're working on for so long. And at the same time, of course, there is this insecurity about the word of feminist, and it's perceived as such like an activist word. And I think it's very important that we create knowledge around the word of feminism and what does feminist mean. So we, with Women Mobilize Women, we did this year a campaign about remarkable feminist voices in transport. Some of these dear ladies, including Kalpana, are in this room, and that was such an important experience for us, because when we gathered these transport experts from around the world for a study tour in Berlin and actually meet up with parliamentarians to discuss feminist development policy, we did a quick round in the beginning, like, what does feminism mean to you? And do you see yourself as a feminist? And many of the women in the room were like, not particularly, wouldn't say that, don't see myself like that. So I think that's very important, because when we talk about gender responsive and gender transformative, we still tend to put this in this niche around women's issues. And in contrast, when we talk about feminism, it's bigger than that. Feminism is equality for all. And in the end goal, it's hopefully equity for all. Also realizing that there's intersectionalities, that there's different layers of discrimination. So in this regard, I still believe it's very powerful that we have this governmental backing and the recognition of feminist development policy. And it includes 3 R's. It's rights, it's representation, and it's resources. And they all are linked with each other. And it's really important that we have like a holistic approach to this. But also not to create like this Disneyland that you now feel that, that we are in. It's not. For instance, there is also an approach that we want to, within GIZ and on behalf of BMZ, we want to double the number of projects that are newly procured by 2025 with the primary goal of gender responsiveness. Sounds awesome, but putting numbers behind us, we are currently at 4% and we're aiming at 8%. So we are still having a long way to go, but an event like this and working with Kalpana since 2018, who's one of our first and dear partners of Women Mobilize Women, gives us hopes that we are going in the right direction, but we need all of you in the room. So it is still a huge challenge ahead.
Thank you. I will maybe ask Anand. Janagraha has done some pioneering work on democracy, civic engagement, technology, a wide range of things, governance, and not all not from a gender perspective, but certainly I think you are introducing it to some extent. So I think if you could share with us, what do you think is missing in policy and practice today, and what is the kind of direction you think we should be going in, and what would Janagraha, what are some of the learnings from the other work you've done on policy?
Thank you, Kalpana. First of all, congratulations for a decade of such excellent work to you, your partner and your team. I think it must have been such an effort, such a journey. Thank you for having me here, and it feels wonderful to be to be in a minority and to be feels privileged. I have 2 nieces, 2 daughters. Our fathers and grandfathers left early, so I'm not new to being in a minority, but I'm just wondering how the discourse all around us continues to be tilted in the other favor. So it's quite interesting for me. But coming to your question, you're very right. We have worked. We've just started baby steps in equity, and equity starting with women and urban poor. In terms of what is missing, and I think this is where the people like Safetipin and those in the room need to be working on. Extraordinary focus still on particular issues which can enable more presence and more empowerment in terms of safety, security, access, etc. But I think we do need to go towards participation, towards representation. And I think that's something that our studies have shown, and this is not just our studies, but even UN Women, UNSCAP, JPAL's, Ms. Duflo, etc. The studies have shown that when you have women in power, in governance, and we really, as Janagra, we focus at the ward level, the councillors. The studies have clearly shown that women councillors or women leaders tend to invest more in assets which are sustainable, that go the longer way. And there is a clear higher fund utilization when there is a woman in power. So we would really like to draw attention to this. You need to move towards representation. It may sound like positive discrimination, but the audience would be surprised to know that while there's 33% reservation for councillors, the 74th amendment, the actual figures are nearly 46%, because some states have just gone ahead and said 50%. So at the council level, our country is way more awakened to the issue, and our parliament is only now trying to take these steps. I think the change is already happening in terms of representation at that level, but it needs nudge. What I would say is missing, and I think this has been brought up, Mr. Sinha brought up, and Madam Chandra brought it up as well. Policymakers need more familiarity as to how their position or what they do as input or process for the output, what is the outcome if they were not to have that lens. So both the gravitas and the power that they have on that issue. So some familiarity. The other is, I think it's a long time we work with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. I've been with them for a long time at state and center. We've gone beyond the social impact assessment and environment impact assessments, which are often lip service. We're now getting into social and environment management frameworks. We're seeing a lot of projects which are bringing that. I would call out right here on this stage for a gendered framework. It just needs to be in here, and it should be, it should either be a condition, as in a minimum score that you achieve on the framework for your projects, or it should be incentivized. I'm not saying it's or, and it can be incentivized. Otherwise, infrastructure and services would always think that they are agnostic to gender. They would completely miss that the entire scheme or project would be biased, would be exclusionary. They just don't know this. So unless there is a framework at hand that says, pass this through, and if you score, so be it. If you don't, too bad, come attend our other session. I think it has to be brought in here. Wonderful tool that I learned about the other day, which I've taken to our organization, that when you write a job description, there is now an AI tool. You can pass your JD that you write, and it'll tell you this is a gender exclusionary JD. It's incredible. I didn't even see this. You would think that you're talking about skills in a manner that is gender ignorant, but you actually get thrown, like Mr. Kunal Kumar said, it's an impact, it's an assessment for myself. So I think such tools, such frameworks need to be much more prevalent in policy. I'll end with that.
Thank you. Actually, all three of you have talked about how the policies can be there, even the intent can be there, but a lot more actually is needed on the ground. So I am going to go to Meera now, who is actually on the ground. Meera is a team lead for the Gender and Policy Lab at the Greater Chennai Corporation. It's the first such body in a corporation, and I think it's amazing that that is happening. Chennai is a rather inclusive and safe city for women, actually. I think it is in terms of crime. But if you could share with us your challenges, successes. I know it's still early, but I think being on the ground, and I know you've done some immense amount of data collection also. So maybe you can just start sharing some of that. Thank you.
Am I audible? Okay. So thank you very much to be on this panel and this meeting, and congratulations to Safetipin, been doing pioneering work on this. We are quite new to this space, in the sense we are 1.5 years old, and we are supported by the Nirbhaya funds. Ma'am talked about the Nirbhaya incident. And we are located within an urban local body. We call the Gender and Policy Lab, the 3 of us and an intern, just totally 4 of us. But then what we are trying to do is leverage and try and reach out on the ground. Before I begin, I'll tell you a little bit about Chennai. We did some facts about Chennai. Recently we did a perception study on what do women in the city perceive about safety, mobility, access. And the findings, some of them were not surprising and some were surprising too. In Chennai as a city, it's a city where you will find women everywhere. It's not like nobody's, we've never felt like we are scared. But as part of the study, a lot of women said that after 6, they're hesitant to go out. And if they go out, they want to go out in groups. And the roads are pretty well lit in Chennai, or so we thought, but they said the inner roads are not so well lit. And we had also done a safety audit along with Safetipin. We engaged citizens also to be part of that. And we found that there were spaces where the street lighting was not good, where there were no signages. And these were some of the things that we found that, needs action. So these are some things that we are working on. But to start out with, like ma'am was saying, how do you explain to somebody that what is it that I have to do? If I speak to a zonal officer, if I say that, okay, here I am, I would go and speak to him. I would say that, sir, we are here to work on the issue of women's safety in public spaces. He'd say, ma'am, that's a police issue. It's not my issue. So that's, then it came to the question of what is it that makes sense to people. So one of the things that we found was that there are a lot of bus stops in the city. We reviewed a lot of bus stops, and we found actually bus stops are also sort of unsafe spaces, because most bus stops are not lit. There is this advertisement which is there at the back, which is the lighting, and often the street, the height of the seats are not convenient for women, and many places the access issues were there for persons with disability, and some of the location of these spaces were such that there would be a wall and then the bus stop, and there's a space there, dark space where men urinate. So these were some of the things that we found were needed to be fixed. So then when we went back to the department which handles bus stops, we said these are gaps. So when you are issuing tenders for the new lot of bus stops, these are the design specifications that we would want in this. And at that point, it started making sense to them. They say, okay, you want this to be done. What's the height? And make sure that it is, fixed at the back. And wherever there is no lighting, there'll be a lighting. No street lighting cannot be the only thing that illuminates a bus stop. And as part of our perception study, we also found a number of other issues. For example, Chennai, it's, 50% of the travelers in any bus are women, and bus is the most used means of transport for women. And one of the things we actually found, this 50% travelers are women, we found it was actually data that came by default from the Metropolitan Transport Corporation, because travel is free for women. And it's a zero ticket which is issued to the women, and they use that data to tell us that 50% travelers are women. So actually, there's no gender disaggregation of data, and this was something that we've been talking to them in terms of how would you make the understand how women are traveling, where are they traveling. But this free travel for women is also, while it's working out well for the women said that, okay, it's free. So a lot of women who are daily wage workers are going a little further away to work so that, they're not spending money on bus fare. But if there is a harassment on the bus, generally 60% or more said that nobody intervenes. And not only do they not intervene, there are men who say, oh, you have free travel by, free travel from the government. Maybe you should go and make a representation that, you want free auto rickshaw or car travel. When you travel free, this is what you have to put up with it. So there's an attitude issue. So which is slightly, beyond what a city authority can do. But yes, this is a characteristic of the city, a safe city, yes. And ma'am had spoken about couples romancing. We have 50% of our councillors in the city are women. So we had a survey for them. Among the many questions we asked them, what is it that makes you feel uncomfortable in a park? Oh, they said, though, there are a lot of couples there. We don't like it. So, so that's there. But you would also see in some of the streets, I have seen in certain spaces, which is probably there in all cities too, you would find that a drunk man is hitting his wife. That's a public space. It's a violence happening in a public space. Nobody actually intervenes. And nobody feels uncomfortable. It's normalized so much. But if there's somebody who's romancing in a park, that makes people feel uncomfortable about it. So, that's something that, it's a city of contradictions, you would say. And but overall, I think people were satisfied with the travel experiences. But then always the last mile connectivity was an issue, which came up. They said, we get off a bus, then what? So that's something which is a gap. And we also realized while we are located within an urban local body, we need to integrate with other government departments and civil society. And so we formed a working group. We have got senior officers an officer from the police who's a member. Then we have got somebody from the Metropolitan Development Authority, the CMDA, which does the planning for the city. There's a senior deputy planner who's on this. And then we have somebody from the Railway Protection Force, because a lot of women travel by electric train. So we have a person at the senior security commissioner level who's on that. And these are some of the things which these committees help us, where we understand that this becomes one body where we are able to reach out to the departments through these representatives. And we have people, voluntary advisory committee, Kalpana as a member, and we have other members from the civil society groups. So it's like, we're trying to be a bridge between civil society, government, and also the public. Because often, like the safety audit that we did, we used 22 people from the public. We made an announcement, we had an interview, and then that's how we got them engaged. So I would say the good thing about Tamil Nadu and Chennai is that there's an intent. There's an intent that, yes, there has to be gender inclusive planning. And a body has been created, that's us, to help with this. But yes, there is a long way to go still, because not just, I mean, the government, we realize now, is also got some kind of challenges, because at some point there's an interface with social attitudes, and social attitudes is something that will change over time. And we do work with the schools. We have a gender module which is being run in the schools to see, catch them young, to see whether we have what is called the gender clubs which are formed. But the good thing is we have a mayor who's a woman. She's a young woman. We have 50% of councillors are women. So these are some of the pluses, and we have policymakers who are willing to listen. So these have been our wins, and we have a civil society who is pushing us, talking to us and telling us do something. And we hope that's helping. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. No, excellent. And I think, all the speakers from the morning till now, I was thinking that 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been hearing this. All of you in this room who have been working on this issue, there has been a change. There has been movement. And I think that is something that is very heartening for us. There's a lot to do. I agree, Meera. But, I think the change is happening. And I think the model of a gender lab within a city, and I think we've always learned that even when we were working with the Safe Delhi work in Delhi, and Sunita will know that, is that you had to get different stakeholders. You're absolutely right. You have to have the police, you have to have the municipal commissioner, you have to have the transport department. So how do you build those multi-stakeholder committees? I think even Janagraha looks at that, and the ward councillors, and empower the lowest level of, which is the closest to the people. And I think that is one of the weaknesses of our system in India. So Nandita, really there's so many things you could speak to, but I think, one of the things is being the Asia Foundation. And I think one of the areas, there are a lot of thematic areas you guys have worked with, including feminist foreign policy. But what is the role? How do we increase the money, the resources coming into some of these areas? What is the tools? What are the arguments we can bring? And I know that you have been fantastic in doing that since you've taken over here. So I just want to hear your perspective, as sort of also sharing with us, all of us working on the ground. How do we really push this agenda? Thank you.
Thanks, Kalpana. Again, first, let me echo congratulations on extremely successful, meaningful 10 years for Safetipin, to you and your team. And I think phenomenal work and cutting edge, really. I think, let me just say that, Asia Foundation is reaching, let me give an example of my own organization. We are probably on our 73rd year this year. In 73 years, it's only last year that we got a first female president for the foundation in all these years. So when you say, what do organizations do to change? I think the phenomena of how women reach leadership and how challenging that is, it's global. So reaching any position, even in an organization whose key pillar is women's economic empowerment, took us 70 plus years to get a female president. And then we are seeing the change. A female president has led to a female CFO of color, which is also a change, which itself is probably not thinkable when I joined the foundation after many years of other organizations in 2008. Now, coming to the issues, I think when we are looking at organizations, the organizations, whether it's the foundation or the UN or a multilateral or bilateral, are themselves being driven by the constructs of equity or inequity that we are discussing today. They are not outside the ambit of that construct. They're within that. And therefore, most times when you see any organization really making meaningful steps or taking meaningful steps towards addressing that, it's because there is somebody within those organizations who are allies, who have gone through the process, who understand the issue, and therefore are willing to take the challenging steps. The articulation of the word feminist came up, and I think, why do people fear it? And that applies to organizations. Are organizations looking to just empower women, which is, yes, important, but Or are they looking to philosophically and ideologically change the construct of development itself, which requires you to say feminist, not web? Okay? Why? It's only when you use such construct in the framing of your policies and your designs, you will actually start questioning power dynamics. Web doesn't allow you to challenge power dynamics. It allows you to empower, but then there is a give and take relationship. Somebody empowers somebody. When you say feminist, you're talking about collectively looking to break systems and dynamics of inequity that cut across every sector of planning, and that requires a different level of engagement and way more resources than what is being put on the table today. Why way more resources? Because it's more intensive. It will require organizations to start focusing on changing perspectives. It's like saying, why are people afraid of romancing couple versus abusive couples? Because romancing couples is an expression of the sexuality of women, which makes people uncomfortable. So a feminist park is something which I think is something, if I'm looking at the agenda, to say, we are looking at a space where people can be open about their positive emotions versus a street where people can be open about their negative emotions of abuse and violence, which are acceptable. So when you talk to organizations like us, or when we engage with organizations, I think we have to be very clear on the discourse we are trying to put forward. We need that change because the discourse will drive the money. I'm right now coming from another German supported engagement, Triangular Cooperation upstairs. Very different audience, all men, very few women. I was the token woman on that one on my panel, I think. No, actually, no, I was wrong. There was one woman, but a lady who was online, so I should take that back. But audience, largely men. Why? Triangular cooperation is political, it's about government, so obviously more men. What do women know about all these issues? Safe city, yeah, women's issue, women's agenda, so women should be there. I totally agree, but it cannot be driven by women. So again, proposals you put forward to organization have to articulate this. There have to be equal number of voices proposing the same changes that we are asking for. Funding is going to be a challenge, but I feel it's also time, Kalpana, for us not to just look at external funds, because, I was talking about this upstairs. We're in a very problematic world. Resources are getting diverted to conflict and conflict management globally. Countries are going through recession. Countries are being made answerable by the taxpayer to say, if I don't have electricity at home in UK, why the hell are you giving it to another third country in assistance and aid? Now the question then is, we limited resources, more conflict, attempt to diffuse, extensive investment on armament. Extensive. Just do a study. I'll not go into the figures. How much has been invested on arms? The question then is, how do we get our resources? Who is going to be listening to our voices? Is the government at home. We have to, and I insist, we have to tap local national resources for the work we do. Why? An external agency, and I know the German government is funding and supporting a lot of the work that we're doing. It's great that actually 2 critical events today are being supported by Germany, both absolutely critical to the larger development discourse. But the question is, it's the local government that's going to be impacted by votes and elections and numbers. Getting them to be able to put money on the table for things you and I want to work with, of course, partnership of other players, is going to be the next move. And data, I think I'm really glad that with Kalpana, I think what you did was, sexual abuse, sexual harassment on the streets. If you've grown up in Delhi, I've grown up in Delhi, I've traveled in buses all my life till I could afford not to travel. And I'm being honest, till I could afford, not because I thought, I don't want to travel in, because it was just the experiences of traveling in public transport was harrowing. But did I ever complain? No. Who would I complain to? If my bag got snatched, I would complain. If somebody groped me, I wouldn't complain. Because it's where do I go to? Then I'll just get the policeman to say, okay, aap kyun ja rahe the? Why were you there in the bus? Who were you with? Why were you standing there? Why did you not sit in the Mahila seat? Okay. All of those gets thrown at me. So I'm like, why go through more discomfort? But the app that you created, I think technology driven solution, real time information on what is happening on the street to a woman. How do we collate that data and use it to do exactly what Shailaja says? Put it back on the table to ask for resources and changes in the government to say, this is what we want. You know, it is important. AI, I'm going to test that, Anand, that next time I put a JD, I'm actually going to put it through ChatGPT AI to see whether it's gender inclusive or not. And I think it's critical. It's also, what's the message? It's, it's the same thing, the dialogue, the question that gets thrown at us is, oh, your organization, how do you make your organization inclusive? And everybody will write this line at the bottom. Women and people with different, sexually different people with abilities, etc., blah, 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 are encouraged to apply. Well, okay. Is it reaching the audience? Is it reaching the papers and the cities that they live in and they read? Is it reaching the communities? No. Where are we putting it? DevNet. Okay. You're not going to get the level of inclusion you want. So I think we have to also strategically change what we are pushing for, what our narrative is, and who we are pushing with. Today, a lot of the bilateral related support that was on the table is going to dry up, has dried up to a great extent. But there are new frameworks for development coming in. We need to insert and own those. We need to insert and own triangular cooperation. It can't be a whole lot of men discussing it. It has to say, what does triangular cooperation globally mean for women and women-led civil society between 3 countries? Are we going to promote that? So to me, that's where I think we need to change. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, really, I've got a panel of rock stars. But I think it's really making me think. But I think you're right, all of you. Actually, the message that's coming through is a similar message. It is like, we have done this, we have come this far. The next steps are, whether you want to call it a feminist policy, whether you're calling it transformation, because when you say gender transformation, you're talking about structural change. Whether what Anand is saying, whether it's at the ground level that we're looking for the change, and then when you get into government, see, government is not some monolith. We tend to say, oh, the state, the government must do this. Who must do it? And I think that is the point that we started this out with. So I'm going to go again for one more round to all of you to really, in the context and really to respond to each other almost, because Mrs. Chandra, you spoke first, but I think many of them have spoken to what you said, And so rather than, I think I'd like to ask you to say that based on, because they spoke after you, is there something more you'd like to add to what you started with in the context of very different, somebody in local government, someone from another country, someone working on governance? Would you like to add something to the message you gave us, which is, I think, very important, because it's been a very practical panel saying, how do we move forward? Okay, all that is up there, but we need change on the ground. And I appreciate what you're saying, Nandita, and I think everyone is saying it since this morning, is that the change has to happen here. We have to influence, we have to insist that we are at the table everywhere. And as people said, if you're not at the table, bring your own chair, sit on the ground. We as Indians are used to sitting on the ground as well, but we have to make our voices heard. Maybe some of us should go upstairs during the lunch hour.
I really think that your panelists really, they have all touched the chord that it matters, but how to make others understand that it matters. Matters hugely, not just a peripheral sort of a thing. Today we are at a position, I think, where we are not able to transfer what is in our knowledge and in our experience to the people who matter. How to articulate it, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge for you and for anybody in this sphere. You look at the police, they will say, oh, law and order comes first, then heinous crimes, murder, rape, dacoity, burglary, theft. In the pecking order, sexual offenses come somewhere at the bottom, and this, which we are talking about, public space, is just completely wo hamara kaam hi nahi hai. It's not our work. So if one has to, it is their work, not to do surveillance, but to find a way with the corporation to make the spaces more safe, more equitable. And I don't want to pontificate. I'll give you one example of something that's happening right outside my house. I live in Vasant Vihar. It's a Tony colony. I lived there because my mother was a government servant and she got a plot and we have done nothing to it. It's the same house. Kalpana has been there. Now, suddenly, what do I find? My neighbor is a liquor baron. And the liquor baron has about 12 people who are your, what are they called, bouncers, and a fleet of cars which originally had police written on it. But then when I started sort of, peering and things, the police has been taken out, but they are like any police vehicle with all their, covers at night and things. Now, this situation, what has it created for us? I walk around my park every day between 8:30 at night, 9:30 at night. I have a woman friend and I put it on Twitter also. We really, really go hammer and tongs whether whatever happened during the day, good, bad, or ugly. But that's one way of getting my 4 kilometers done. I used to walk unimpeded every day. And there were guards and there were drivers who were sitting around. Nobody cared to look at this old woman. Now I have 12 men, and it's not me who I'm bothered about. They're staring at me. I'm bothered because the girls who stay in that locality, foreigners, girls who've probably been abroad, they come in tight shorts and they walk around the block. They always did it. There's nothing new. But the men are ogling. Whether they have noticed it or not, it is sort of, literally they take a breath when this girl walks because, it's just a sight they've never seen. And she's just walking, she's doing nothing else. But her space is being invaded. She's probably come from abroad and doesn't know that this is happening to her. This is how completely your space, your rights get taken over. How will you tell this to any policeman or any police deputy DCP? He'll turn around and say, but where's the offense? Where is the crime? This is the difference. When you talk about public spaces, you talk about your rights to those as women, one has to articulate it in a way that it goes beyond the realm of crime and punishment. It goes to, this is my right to be able to live in a particular way. Why is it being taken from me? That's all. And I think that's really what I have to say.
That's very powerful. And I think the right to the city, the right to my personal space. Many, many years ago in Jaguri, we actually did a campaign called Staring Hurts. Because everyone thinks, okay, rape is bad, okay, someone gropes you, it's bad. But actually staring, it hurts you as a woman. You don't feel, you start looking around, you're uncomfortable. So I think it is an important point. So I'm just going to give each of the speakers a chance to speak a little bit and say, again, I think probably what makes most sense is to respond to what the others have said here, because I think so many interesting points have come up. So let's just go in order. Maybe Anand, you next.
Do you mind if I bucket a little bit and talk about something positive? Because such wonderful things have been said. I don't want to reiterate or waste time reinforcing it. I'm an architect myself, and I love the kind of work that you're doing. And I work in governance, and there is something very interesting that I'm seeing. I'm born and brought up in Gujarat. And that's the land of Seva and Mahila Housing Trust and Saath and such wonderful women that I've interacted with. I've taken care services for children as well as elderly. The structures that they have in place in order to ensure that the women who are with them and who come to our households they are enabled, I am insured, they are insured, they are protected. It's wonderful. And this, I'm talking about 20, 30 years ago. It's now become a legacy, but a very positive thing. And it's just a single word that somebody mentioned here that I'd like to pick on, that I think it was you. When women come together, when they gather, and in governance, I would like to use the word federated. When they are brought together, we are seeing some miracles in this country, and I'd like to just make a case for this because we're working very closely in Odisha with the Jaga Mission. There's the Slum Dwellers Association. 50% are women again. We see power. The municipal budgets now has been passed in the Odisha Legislative Assembly. 50% of the 25%, sorry, would be devolved to lower income settlements, which means 25%, a good portion of the 25% is the slums, and there's going to be 50% women who's going to decide on a good portion of the 25% of the municipal budgets. This is terrific. You know, we have Kunubashri in Kerala. I'm sure many in this room know this. It didn't start out as a gender specific kind of a mission, but now increasingly there have been women participants, and it's gone to the extent, and I hear this, that we had senior government representatives, that if you actually want a giant killer in the elections, and this is in state elections, you'd be better off with a lady from the Kudumbashri mission, because she has such hold on her group of women and her community that it's actually translating to political power. This is fantastic. And the other day we were in another place where again we're talking about federated women, and the women introduced themselves as Mera Naam. I'm a part of this group. My senior is this. My reporting officer is this. My block officer is this. My district officer is this. She has stepped out of her family and formed a stronger family connect. And that stepping out of another environment, and she said this quite vocally in Hindi, this is actually Bihar. She actually said this quite vocally, that I didn't have an existence when I was in my family. If somebody came to the door, I would say, Ghar pe koi nahi hai. Can you imagine this? Just because the male members in the house are not there, her answer is, and this for you, there is no one at home. She's answering this to an extent where she's announcing herself as a part of a family of an organization. So I think these are some very interesting movements we are seeing. So more power to this, rather than speaking to those in a traditional power structure. And we are seeing change happening in that way. I thought I'd just bring this to the notice.
Thank you. You're right. There's so much happening actually. So over to you.
I think I'll take on from where Anand you left. I think 50% of the population in the world is women, and probably more. But having said that, the power is disproportionately controlled and held by the other 50%. It's important, therefore, that we look at collective forces and voices of women, and that's always been an important part, because I think collectively to fight a 50% who has 80% power is better, definitely. But that doesn't mean that the 50% who are holding and defining power don't be addressed to change their perspective, because I think that is going to be critically important, because entering power spaces for women is, we have seen the change right from the grassroots and hopefully now at the city level. But I think mindset change will require us to work at both levels, both with women and targeted work with men as well. Sunita is sitting here, and I know that when we were in UN Women, she was actually spearheading a lot of our work on gender-based violence and working with men. Not working with men to say, oh, I'm going to stop violence, but working with men to say violence is not acceptable. It's not about saying, oh, I'll not be violent on a woman. No, it's not. That's not the point. That's not what we are asking. We're just saying violence is not accepted. And that is somewhere I think that perception change is required. And I sometimes, I'm concerned, Kalpana, and I'm just going to place this. When states want to create a perspective and a perception change on anything, they put their whole might against doing it. And we are seeing it all around us. Changes, collective changes being created on certain frameworks of, alliances or identities. And the states want to do it, they do it. But when it comes to really getting this larger feminist, gendered, equitable perspective change, they tend to shy away. And I am back to that. I think it is the question of questioning the power bearers. And the collective voice of women is going to be critical, but making sure that we address the men as well to be in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So maybe I'm not as hopeful as you are, because I completely agree. And I think what's really important is that we are, in my understanding, at a very critical point in this development, because I feel as long as we are discussing this a little bit among each other, preaching to the choir, we all agree it's important, bring more women at the table. But in the moment it gets into power dynamics, because it will not be just an added chair at the table. It will mean that some others will have to leave the table. And this is where it becomes very, very critical. And this is also what we experience with the feminist development policy. There's a backslash. Because it's fine while we're doing like women empowerment, yes, everyone will agree. But it's not just another audit. It's not just disaggregated gender data. It is so much more complex. And also, what's really important about this topic is we cannot put it in a little box and say, oh, this is what I do for work and this is what I discuss in my daily working hours. You will bring this at home. So the political is very much private. It is private within your teams. It is something that we all have to reflect within each other, with our partners, with our families. In our daily life, you cannot unsee things until when you realize that there is like these power dynamics. And this is why it's crazy uncomfortable to have these discussions. It is so uncomfortable because all of the women in the room, we have our stories to tell. And these are stories that are very uncomfortable for others to hear. And I think that's kind of where I stand with, there's a lot to do. And I don't want to continue that we have these discussions among each other and everyone is sitting here and nodding. I would like to go upstairs and have these discussions there. So, yeah, I think that's...
It's very interesting, the panel, and a lot of very interesting points came up. And I would like to say a couple of things. I agree with both of you. What you say, it is a question of shifting the power structure. So, initially when we started working, we used to go around in the communities, hold meetings and all. And one of the things that we kept hearing from the women is that a woman told me that, see, I don't like to be observed in the public space. I come out only if there's a need. I don't loiter. I don't go around just like that, and that's not something that I like to do. And this came up again during the focus group discussions, where the women said that if she's not getting a bus, she would just take any bus and go somewhere else because she doesn't want to be stared at. That's what ma'am had also mentioned. So this whole space, traditionally, women have been kept out of public space. And as a society, we have evolved, but still there is this feeling that, in a public space is a man's world, and we just come into the public space with a purpose, we complete the purpose and we go. There's we had a consultation in a school where there is a street program which is happening. It's called the Mega Streets program, where the street development is happening. And one of the girls, she said that I am not allowed to go to some part because there's some boys standing there. So my mother says, don't go past that road. But then when you look at that, she says that why is it that just because somebody is present, I cannot go, the road is also mine. So, those are some of the things that we need to address. The city is for everybody, and it's not just for men, because they have always been in the public domain. That's one. And the second thing is, I'm very impressed with what Anand talked about, working with the counselors and this whole thing about collectivization. In Tamil Nadu, there's been a very strong self-help group movement too. But unfortunately, I think a lot of it has been in the rural areas. In the urban areas, we don't have that kind of a vibrant movement which has come in, which is the need of the hour. And I also feel there is a need for elected representatives and bureaucrats to work together and learn to, trust each other and work together without there's always the feeling, I think, at the back of the bureaucrat that, this will become a political issue if I involve too many councillors, so how's this going to happen? And the councillors would think, okay, these people are just, paper pushers. And that's a challenge that we are trying to negotiate, where we have our commissioners, deputy commissioners, and others who we work with. We also have the councillors who are there. So, these are two sides to the same coin. So we need to work with them, and I think that's something that will bring about a very balanced development of any city. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Mrs. Chandra said she had one quick anecdote she wanted to add.
Yes, I thought that it's very topical, so I thought I would share it. I had been to Indore recently. Indore, of course, as you all know, has won the Cleanest City in India award 6 times running. That is well known, and how many tons they recycle and segregate, blah, blah, blah. It's got every single magazine and newspaper has covered it. But I wanted to know the how of it. So I got after the municipal commissioner, she's a woman, and I said, I want to go around, give me a team, I want to understand the how of it. Because this is something that happens which affects women and men. It's not a gender issue. So I'm just telling you the anecdote because it made such a powerful impression on me. What made the difference? Every city in the country, urban city, was given the chance to participate in a competition. 6 years running, it is Indore which has won the first prize throughout India, where there's something like 500 cities which are competing. What did they do differently? The biggest thing was that they got an elected, because there it's a mayor in council, so she's elected from the public, not from the way the other elections are run. He or she gets a 5-year term and cannot be got rid of for those 5 years. She was a woman. And a municipal commissioner came, who also came on the plank of clean this city. The two of them work together in tandem, and it's unbelievable what they have done. Every single household segregates waste not into 2, but into 6 bins. It is recycled by women and men rag pickers who get a salary now. They don't sit over there outside, and ultimately it is sold, and there's remuneration if you are able to sell per kilo so many used bulbs, per kilo so many used toothbrushes. It's a lot of money, 6 rupees a kilo, 10 rupees a kilo, like that. Very different from what the kabadi does. Now, this example I'm just giving you because I think it's important to understand that this meeting of minds, man or woman didn't matter, but this 5-year meeting of minds has changed that city. Now the public will not have Indore becoming second. The public want to do this segregation. They want to see that the CNG, which is made from the bio remediation, is used for 150 city buses. This has nothing to do with gender, but all that I want to say is when I talk to the people who manage, they have NGOs who actually work as the good cop. The municipal corporation does the fining and the lecturing and the browbeating. The good cop goes to the house and says, Mataji, mother, aunt, Behenji, this is the way you do it. I'll show you how the segregation is done. Try and understand. You don't have a bin, I'll give you a bin. And this is what has made the change. And I'm only saying that the grassroots does matter. The point that was made over and over again, and which really that is what you were emphasizing on, it's absolutely important. The big data is for policymakers, but the work is done down there. And that is where one needs that leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that anecdote. I mean, this panel has talked from feminist policy to personalist political, to romance, to daily lives, to, backlash, to everyday negotiations and collective power. But I think what is really significant for me from both the panels, the previous one and this one, is that we are actually now at the stage of implementation. I think we've recognized, I'm not saying everywhere, I'm not saying across the government, but there is enough change. And I think there is, the next step is how do we do this? And that is as difficult as the first step. Right? We are beginning to generate data, not just Chennai, many cities. There has been a lot of data, not just in India, but in other places. The World Bank, others, the UN system has put out a lot of data on this issue. We know that the care economy is held up by women. How do we translate this? And I think each one of you have actually talked about that process, you know. How does it actually work on the ground within the government? How do you make partnerships? How do you empower communities? Because this is not going to be done by the government alone. This has to be done with communities, with women's organizations, with youth groups, with civil society partners, with groups like Janagraha who do the convening. You know, I think the point we're coming to is that, you know, in the next 10 years, I mean, we have to start having maybe 10-year visions for ourselves, you know, as civil society. What is it that we want to achieve? And we also cannot do it on our own. So we have to recognize that we have to work with each other. You know, it is not about setting up your own shop and making a small difference. It is really about, finally, at the end of it, there being some difference on the ground. And the examples you get, of course, Kudumbashri, we all know about it. It's a fantastic example. And I think that, you know, we have our feminist friends in Kerala who've been part of it right from the beginning. And I think it really spread because it reached out to every single stakeholder that was there, you know. I think, you know, I believe that the Gender and Policy Lab that has been started in Chennai, probably it's a good practice. We should have it in every city. You know, so this, I mean, Mr. Kunal Kumar has left, but I think that's what we'll take to him. Jinal is there. You can tell him what we would like is actually, along with the data officer, we'd like a gender lab. And I like the word lab because it is an experimental space where you're collecting data, where you're trying solutions, where you're trying to do something different. And really at the end of it, I think, you know, cities, I mean, everyone's talked about how cities are growing, urbanization is the future. We all know that. And we love and we hate our cities, all of us, you know. I think especially in the global south, our cities are messy, they're chaotic. But really, I mean, you know, everyone says, oh, I'm going to go after the hills. I don't see that many people going after the hills. We continue to live in our cities and complain about the pollution, about this thing. So the change we have to be part of that change, I think. And I think everyone in this room is doing important work that is part of that change. So thank you once again for all being here. And thank you so much to this amazing panel. I learned so much. Thank you so much.
So after that powerful panel discussion, are we all ready for some food?